Yesterday was a very sad day for me when I learned that my cousin Barry had passed away. And with that news, I began to reflect on how our lives intertwined over the years and thought about some happier times and some of the adventures that we had together as youngsters, as teenagers, and as adults. Growing up in Brooklyn, Barry was not only my cousin, but he was also my best friend and teacher. He introduced me to baseball as well as the game, spelled APBA, that we played against each other for many years and kept score about our teams. In 1951, we spent a very interesting month or two in the Catskill Mountains one summer with our mothers. Barry loved to teach me and sometimes to torment me, but I always loved him. After we graduated from college, we both ended up in Pennsylvania. His father, my wonderful Uncle Joe, bought the Penview Motel in Reading, Pennsylvania, and I would drive to Reading from Philadelphia on many weekends, and we would enjoy each other's company and sometimes get into a little trouble. I will never forget the time that Barry convinced me that we should go to Greenville, South Carolina from Reading, Pennsylvania one night because he had heard that there were lots of good looking girls in Greenville and not many men. So we drove several hours from Pennsylvania to South Carolina. We arrived in Greenville early in the evening. We drove all the way there, and when we looked around, Barry said, "I don't see too many pretty girls here," and um, and he said, "You know, let's go back." And I said, "When?" And he said, "Tonight." And I said, "Well, we just got here." And he said, "Yeah, but there's nothing happening here." So Barry was always persuasive and convinced me that it was a good idea to now turn around and drive hundreds of miles back to Reading, Pennsylvania. And we drove all the way there. And at times I was thinking, why did I do this? But that was the Barry I loved and admired. Um, he was he was always thinking about something interesting, something new, something daring, and I would go along with him. And so, we went on trips together. We went to Puerto Rico, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and at some point, um, my uncle Joe had invested in a nightclub in Beverly Hills called Bumbles, and it was a big hit, and all the celebrities were coming there, and Uncle Joe asked Barry to move out there and run the business. Um, and he managed the nightclub, which is not bad for a guy with a bachelor's degree in accounting from City College of New York. It was a big change for him. Um, so that was a lot about what how Barry interacted with lots of people, and he was very successful in Bumbles. At some point as well, it became clear to me that Barry never threw away anything. Um, no matter what, paper, games, books, clothes, photos, whatever you can think of, Barry had it. And once he acquired something or was given something, he never got rid of it. In fact, at some point, he, I think, actually had to get another apartment just for all his stuff. And so, it's, we just, you never knew. He'd say, you never know when you would want that information or when you'd want to look up that book or something like that. We played games, and we would challenge each other, and we would laugh together, and we would. Uh, it was always something that he wanted me to do, and I always strive to be the person that he could count on, to whether it was to play games, to read, to talk about um, business, talk about our lives. Um, Barry was my go-to guy, and I think in a lot of ways I was that for him. Um, and he never forgot anything. So, um, so if I wanted to know something, I knew I could always ask him. And in my mind, he was just one of a kind. Um, and even though we didn't see each other very often in the last um, decade or so, I always enjoyed talking to him. His last few years was not easy, and he never gave up. And he continued to look for things that interested him, like finding the street that my mother lived in 100 years ago in Montreal, or someone who had been buried in a grave in Canada, or the flower girl at my mother's first marriage, and who is now in her late 90s, and Barry found her. And anytime I needed to find somebody, I knew I could call Barry. I was trying one day, not too long ago, I was trying to find one of my cousins, my father's side of the family, and I couldn't get to them because he had a very common Jewish name, and he lived in Florida. And there's a lot of people with those names in Florida, and I couldn't find them. And then I mentioned it to Barry. I called him on his birthday one time, and I said, I haven't been able to contact them. And he asked me about 5 questions, and the next day I got a call from him, and he said, "You never guess who I talked to yesterday? I talked to your cousin in Florida. They're very interested in talking to you and seeing you sometime." And I said to him, "How could you have found them? I mean, their last name was Cohn. You know how many Cohns there are in Miami? And Seymour Cohn. I mean, not a very uncommon name. But that was Barry. He got it. I don't know how he did it. He would never tell me how he did all these things. And it was it was just a very special thing. And even though we didn't see each other all that often these days, because travel and distance and all the rest, I talked to him every so often. I talked to him pretty often, and I would call him on his birthday, which I did just recently. And he was so excited that he found all these things for me. So last week when I called him and he was in the hospital, um, his voice was soft. I could tell he was in pain, and he, it was a very hard time for him. And I just told him that I loved him, that I missed him, and that I'll never forget him.